are one of the rich patricians trying to build your district to gain profits and have the best landscape. Do you want to learn how to seize the day and play Carpe Diem?
In this video, we're going to take you through the full rules for this game, and if you stay tuned till the end, you can pick up some tips and strategies along the way. Coming up. Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University, we bring you a variety of quality board game videos.
So, if you're new here, please consider subscribing and do hit the bell to be notified of our new videos.
Now let's get to the rules of Carpe Diem, game by Stefan Falcke and published by Ravensburger.
In Carpe Diem, players play the role of ancient Roman patricians attempting to build up their part of the city to be the best it can be. Players will move around this ring of tiles, taking tiles from the board and adding them into their cities, gaining resources and other benefits for doing so. At the end of each round, players aim to score from 2 of these objectives, and they'll pick 2 adjacent objectives, scoring them for how well they've gone, or losing points if they've failed. After 4 rounds of objectives, players will add bonuses for some other features in their cities, such as villas or banderscrolls, and whoever has collected the most victory points wins the game. Note that what we're showing you here is the first printing of the game. If you have the second printing, your board will look different, and in particular will lack the star pattern in the centre. There is one small change to the movement rules for the second printing, and I'll explain that when it arises. But everything else we explain here for the first printing remains true for the second. I'm not going to step you through the full setup of this game, but I'm going to show you what the end of setup looks like. There are 2 different types of building tiles in the game, light greenbacks and dark greenbacks. On each space of this rondel, you'll find 4 light green backed tiles, all face up. On this strip down the bottom of the board, you'll find 11 dark green backed tiles, also face up. All of the rest of the tiles sit off to the side, ready for use in subsequent rounds. In this section of the board, you'll put the scoring cards that you're going to use in this game. There are 4 different types of scoring cards, A's, B's, C's and D's, and as part of the setup you pick a certain number of each of them in order to make sure you've got a good balance. This is detailed in the rulebook. You'll use all 12 spaces in a 4-player game, you'll leave these 2 corners empty in a 3-player game, and all 4 corners will be empty in a 2-player game. Each player will have a player board where the tiles will go, surrounded by 4 of these unique strips put together. These have different symbols on them, and those are going to come into final scoring. Each player also has a reference board, some discs, and starts with some victory points depending on his or her position in the starting turn order. Once again, you'll find the specifics in the rulebook. Choose a first player and you're ready to go. Carpe Diem is played in 4 phases, and each phase has 7 rounds. Each time it is a player's turn, the player will move to another location on this rondel, choose one of the building tiles, and then build it into his or her city. This continues until all players have chosen 7 tiles. Then, in order from highest to lowest on the banderole track, each player takes it in turns to choose 2 objectives from the objective board to score. Once each player has chosen 1 objective, the board will be refilled with tiles for the next round. The first player token moves clockwise around the table, and then play continues as the pieces lie. So now let's look at these steps in more detail. On a normal turn, making a movement involves taking the player's meeple and then moving it along one of these lines in the center of the board to one of the 2 spaces opposite. It does not matter whether there are any other players' meeples in the destination, any space can be occupied by as many meeples as desired. A player must make a move to one of these destinations. Player cannot stay still. In the second printing of the game, the star pattern in the center of the board is gone, and instead of choosing one of 2 opposite locations, the player must choose an adjacent space. In other words, the star has been replaced with a circle. These two layouts are exactly equivalent in gameplay, but the second printing's circular layout may make it a little bit more intuitive to plan ahead. Once the player has reached the destination, he or she must take one of the available tiles from that location, ready to be built into his or her city. Once the player has done this and built the tile, play passes to the next player who does likewise. In the 4-player game, you'll keep drawing tiles from these spaces until they're empty, but in a game with fewer players, as soon as you have taken as many tiles from a space as there are players in the game, any remaining tiles are removed, leaving that space empty. Those removed tiles are discarded from the game. As such, you'll be discarding the last 2 tiles from each of these spaces in a 2-player game, and you'll be discarding the final tile in a 3-player game. A player cannot finish his or her move on an already empty location, and so if a player moves to an empty location, he or she continues moving along these lines, either moving to the next one in the sequence, or, if desired, moving back along the path to the location whence he or she came. The first time the player's Meeple reaches a location with tiles left, that is where the player stops and draws a tile. These basic rules concerning movement can be broken by a player who has and spends bread. I'll talk about how you gain bread later, but by spending a bread token, a player may, instead of just moving along these lines, move to any one of the 7 locations on the board. This includes staying in his or her current location. After taking the bread movement, as usual, the player will take a tile from the board and look to build it on his or her city. Now that we've spoken about how to move around the rondel, we will talk about how to build into your cities. A player's city board will look like this at the start of the game. It will have no tiles on it, it will have these little banderole tokens covering the relevant spaces, and there'll be a shovel space. The first time a player acquires a tile from the board, he or she must place it onto the shovel space. It may be placed in any rotational configuration. From that point forward, any tiles that the player acquires must be placed on the board meeting 2 restrictions. Firstly, it must be placed orthogonally adjacent to at least one other tile on the board. Diagonally adjacent is not allowable. And it must be placed so that all sides of this tile match with any other tiles it's adjacent to, like so. So here the tile could be placed like so, matching the purple with the purple, or you could simply match the grassy sides like that. Note that the frames of your board are considered to be grass, and so this would not be a legal placement. If a player places a tile such that it goes where one of the banderole tokens is, then the token is removed, and the player advances 1 step along the banderole track. If a token lands on top of another, it is placed on top, and tokens on top are considered to be ahead. If a player does not wish to place a tile or cannot do so legally, then the player simply flips the tile face down and keeps it on his or her player board. It serves no other purpose in the game other than being able to be cashed in for victory points at the end. Anytime a feature of your city is completed, like so, you will immediately score a benefit for it based on these icons here, and this is what we'll go through now. The first type of feature in game is the landscapes, and there are 4 different types: farms for chicken, gardens for herbs, vineyards for grapes, and ponds for fish. When any one or more of these is completed, the player is immediately rewarded with the matching type of wares. The number of wares gained is equal to the number of tiles in that landscape minus 1. So each of these 2 tile landscapes is worth 1 wares token. Placing this tile to complete the pond and the 3 tile vineyard would be worth 1 fish and 2 grapes. The maximum possible size of any one of these landscapes is 4 tiles, as there aren't enough tiles in the game to make longer. The next type of feature are the dwellings, and there are 4 different dwellings, each of which is split across 2 tiles like so. Each dwelling has a different effect. Completing the grey administrator dwelling allows the player to move 2 steps up on the banderole track. The brown baker's dwelling allows the player to immediately gain 2 loaves of bread. The yellow merchant's dwelling allows the player to cash in any wares that he or she has collected for gold coins plus 1 gold coin. So, trading in 5 wares like that would yield 6 coins. Gold coins count as wilds, and so you're always better off having these gold coins than the default wares. Watch out for the merchants and the bakers. Their colours are similar but distinct. Finally, the green dwelling is the craftsman, and it immediately allows the player to place another tile. Go to the main board and choose any one of the 11 dark green backed tiles from this bottom strip. Do not refill the gap that you leave. Then immediately build that per the normal placement rules, gaining any bonus if you then complete a building with that. The next type of building is the villa, which is represented by the red brick roof. Villas can be built onto the player's board, but they have no effect during the game. However, players will be trying to construct and complete villas as part of either completing objectives or scoring end-of-game victory points. At the end of a game, a completed villa will be worth a number of points based on how many chimneys are showing on its roof. The last 3 types of buildings in the game are all standalone. That is, they sit on a single tile. When placing the bakery, the player draws 1 bread. When placing a market, the player gains 1 gold coin. And finally, placing a fountain allows the player to draw 1 end-of-game fountain card. The player draws 2 cards off the top of the deck, looks at them, decides which one is likely to be worth more points, takes it, and then places the other one back onto the bottom of the fountain deck. Upon placing another fountain later in the game, the player repeats this, drawing another 2 and then looking at them. However, if the player prefers both of the ones that he or she has just drawn, he or she may return one taken earlier in the game and keep both of the newly drawn ones. This covers all of the different types of buildings available in the game. The other thing to know about tile placement in Carpe Diem is how to score points off these markings on the edge of your frame. At the end of the game, you will look down the grid line that corresponds to each of these lines, and if you have completed a building of the matching type that spans that grid line, you will score the points shown in that icon. The building that you score must be complete, so this one would not score here, and each of these icons can be scored only once. So even though this spans 2 completed villas, you would score the 3 points only once. After the tiles have all been taken in each phase of the game, you will proceed to scoring the objectives. Each player will score 1 pair of adjacent objectives in each phase. Starting with the player who is furthest ahead on the banderole track, remembering that being on top of a stack breaks the tie, the player will look through all of the open spots between 2 cards on this board and choose one to score. A disc cannot be placed where there is already another discs, and all discs will stay there for the entire duration of the game. After placing the disc, the player scores each as many times as he or she can, and can choose to score them in either order. To score a red objective, the player must pay the wares that match that objective card in order to gain the matching victory points. Here, the player could trade 1 herb for 1 point, or 3 herbs for 3 points. Scoring green objectives requires the player to have certain types of buildings or dwellings built into his or her city. As such, the player does not have to relinquish anything to score this objective. So here, the yellow player would get a banderole and a bread for every 3 chimneys that he or she has built into the city. There are 8 chimneys, so that's worth 2 bread and 2 banderoles. Chimney objectives can be on completed or incompleted villas, but all other green objectives will be on completed buildings. Any one of these objectives can also be considered to be completed by spending 3 bread. This can be in addition to completing the objective properly, so the blue player going here could pay 2 grapes and 3 bread to finish this twice and gain 8 points. The most important thing is that players position themselves so that they are able to complete both of the objectives they place on. As for any objective that the player cannot complete, he or she must lose 4 points. As such, the difference between completing this once and not completing it at all is 7 points. Here again is where it can be good for players to hold back 3 bread in case they're forced into an objective that they can't otherwise meet. Options will become more and more limited as the game goes on, until the final choice at the end of the final phase of the game will be between only 2 locations on this board. After resolving scoring at the end of phases 1 or 2 of the game, refill all of these 28 spaces using tiles with the light green back. All players' meeples will stay where they already were. Then hand the first player marker 1 step clockwise and proceed with the next phase of the game. You will do the same at the end of the 3rd phase of the game, except you'll refill using tiles with the dark green back. The only difference between the light green tiles and the dark green tiles is that all of the dark green tiles have either 3 or 4 grassy edges. You should keep this in mind when planning for the final round, making sure you leave enough spaces for all of these grassy edges and realising that any new buildings you start will be short buildings. After the 4th scoring phase, proceed to end of game scoring. The steps for end of game scoring are detailed down the bottom of your player aid. First, take any wares, gold coins, bread and leftover unplaced building tokens that you've collected and cash them in for victory points at a ratio of 1 to 2. Score 1 point for each step you've progressed on the banderole track, so here blue scores 15. Look at all of the scoring bonuses around your frame and work out any where you've got at least 1 completed building of the type matched here and score the points shown on that icon. As this is laid out, the player scores 20 points. Next, any players who have built fountains flip over their fountain cards and score points based on what's shown here. Here the player gets 2 points for each market and 2 points for each completed vineyard. So this one, but not this one, for a total of 6. Finally, the player scores each completed villa based on its number of chimneys and this table. This 6 chimney villa is worth 9 points. These two chimney villas are each worth 2 points, and this incomplete villa is worth nothing, for a total of 13. Players add these to the points they've been collecting through the game, and whoever has the highest score wins. In the event of a tie, whoever is furthest back on the banderole track breaks the tie. And that's how to play Carpe Diem. We hope that you enjoyed this video, and we hope you enjoy playing.
If you enjoyed this video, please let us know by hitting the like button. Write your questions or feedback in the comment sections below. You can also join our Facebook group, Meeple University Community, to share your love of board games.
And finally, if you'd like to be among the first notified of our new videos, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can click on the Meeple up in the corner to do so, and do hit the bell to be notified of our new videos.
Until next time!